It's with pleasure and enthusiasm that I recognize Erika Hayasaki with the 2020-21 Teaching Award for the School of Humanities. Erika Hayasaki joined UCI's Department of English in 2009 and quickly earned a reputation as an outstanding and admired teacher. Her courses have covered a variety of topics in the field of literary journalism, including narratives of science and the mind, digital storytelling, and the literature of death and dying. A comment on an evaluation from her winter 2020 lecture course in literary journalism simply asserts, Erika is the best professor at UC Irvine. While at least a few other exceptional professors at UCI must have received similar comment, it nonetheless reveals the enthusiasm that Professor Hayasaki's teaching elicits. In her workshops, she frequently lines up guest speakers so that students are exposed to a variety of voices and approaches from the world of journalism. And these guests are not from just anywhere. They come from The Atlantic, The Guardian, The Economist, Los Angeles Magazine, BuzzFeed, and more. In her workshop, she engages intimately with the writing process, helping her students move from being nervous novices to simultaneously more confident and more self-aware practitioners of the craft. Knowledgeable, supportive, and challenging, these are some of the key terms that characterize Erika Hayasaki as a teacher. I'm thus delighted to recognize Professor Hayasaki for her outstanding teaching in the School of Humanities.
Hi, so I've been asked what was one of my favorite teaching moments as a professor, and I can't actually narrow it down to one moment, so I'm just going to share a email first from a student who wrote to me, a graduate. She wrote to me just a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, "Dear Professor Hayasaki, I was not a literary journalism major. I was intimidated when I had to interview someone, and half the time I didn't know or feel comfortable with what I was doing. But now, all of what made me uncomfortable is what I remember the most. You pushed me and taught me to go in and sometimes just have a conversation with somebody. This coming from someone who writes lists of questions and topics so I wouldn't be faced with awkward silence. And most importantly, you taught me to focus on the what and the why. What does this show about the human condition? These were your words of advice for assignments, and I still follow them. My aim now is to explore that. What is the human condition? What are its various phases? And how can I communicate that? How can I, a human, connect with other humans humanly? I want you to know that although we were never connected much in class, although I was quiet and anonymous, I still remember everything. And I want you to know that the work you do is not going out into some void. It does stick and take root and blossom." And so that email meant a lot to me. For me, I cannot claim one single favorite teaching moment. I feel like each one builds off another that came before it. But this letter really reminded me of when I was a teenager and I was in this program for student journalists at the Seattle Times called the Urban Newspaper Workshop. And it was run by this amazing woman, Caroline Carmichael, and this crew of journalists of color who mentored other young journalists of color. And I was doing one of my very first stories on this Cambodian refugee who started an herbal medicine shop in Seattle. And he foraged and collected herbs himself. And I was profiling him, and I was so terrified to do this interview. I was just terrified. And I remember having this journalist by my side. Her name was Florangela Davila. And she literally almost held my hand and walked me into this interview and got me through it. And I feel like this has sort of been the story of my career. I've been just so fortunate and privileged because I've had these people pass through my life. And sometimes it's brief, but they impart these bits of wisdom and guidance and these small moments, each of which had huge meaning for me. And as a professor, I feel like that's what we're doing. We're passing on these lessons that someone somewhere along the way passed on to us, hoping that something sticks and takes root. And so thank you for this. And thank you to my students for giving that back to me.